Right, well, Russia's parliament has begun the process of suspending Moscow's participation in the 2010 New START nuclear treaty. President Vladimir Putin announced the suspension in a major national address on Tuesday, blaming the United States and the West for the breakdown in the pact. The New START treaty caps the number of nuclear warheads that Moscow and Washington can deploy. Russia's state parliament, the Duma, approved the suspension today. All right, well, let's speak now to DW's Moscow bureau chief, Yuri Reshetto, who is now based in the Latvian capital, Riga, after Russian authorities closed down DW's Moscow office. Yuri, great to see you. So, we've seen those images now of that meeting between Vladimir Putin and China's top diplomat. What exactly does today's vote on the New START nuclear treaty in the Russian parliament mean? And of course, with this meeting taking place, do you expect that to come up?
Well, the vote will certainly be in favour of the president's decision in both chambers of the Russian parliament. Nothing else has ever happened in the last 20 years. The question is, Pablo, what exactly does suspending Russia's participation in the treaty mean? And what is the difference between leaving the treaty and just suspending it? The possibility of suspension isn't part of the contract. However, Putin's wording about suspending may be a signal that Russia is not going to increase the number of warheads, at least not significantly. This is also confirmed by the Russian Foreign Ministry, which said that Moscow would comply with the restrictions of the number of nuclear warheads provided for by the treaty until 2026, when this agreement expires.
Yuri, tell us, why did Vladimir Putin decide to suspend Russia's participation in the treaty, or why do you think?
Well, Putin pointed out different arguments. Firstly, he called the whole thing a theatre of absurdity, meaning that under the current conditions, NATO requires Russia to comply with this treaty and letting Western experts into strategic facilities. Putin's explanation is that the West is directly involved in Ukraine's attempts to strike Russian strategic air bases. Second, Putin said Russia is not allowed to conduct inspections with the Russian experts in the nuclear facilities in the United States. Finally, Washington would be allegedly thinking about the testing of new nuclear weapons. In this regard, the Russian president, by the way, instructed the Russian Ministry of Defense already to prepare for possible Russian nuclear tests.
Yuri, tell us a little bit about the consequences of today's vote in the Duma for the war in Ukraine.
Well, I think since Russia has so far not used nuclear weapons in the war against Ukraine, but is fighting in Ukraine with conventional weapons, there is no direct connection to the war in Ukraine. Nevertheless, Putin repeatedly threatens to fight back with all means Russia has, including, of course, indirectly nuclear weapons. And according to Russian television and its daily propaganda shows, a nuclear weapon or nuclear war could start tomorrow. So it's a suspension that makes the situation more threatening.
Thanks, Yuri. DW's Moscow bureau chief, Yuri Reshetto, in Riga for us.
And as the snow falls in Kyiv, let's go live to DW's Fanny Fashar in the Ukrainian capital. Fanny, such a big 24 hours. What did Ukrainians make of President Biden's speech?
To them, this is a ray of hope. One has to understand that there's simply not much to smile about here in Ukraine since Russia unleashed this full-scale invasion nearly a year ago. So President Biden first coming here to Kiev, actually he was at this site where I'm standing right now on Monday, and then headed straight to Warsaw to reaffirm the American commitment to support, as he says, this country, quote, as long as it takes. It's just very important to people here. It means a lot to them. But at the same time, of course, it's combined to this sense of urgency here amongst people that they're saying, it's very important, of course, that the US is rhetorically reaffirming its commitment, but there needs to be, of course, more. That means weapons that really help to repel Russian forces, and not just air defense systems. They are, of course, important to protect people here on the ground, but people are really calling for those fighter jets. They're calling for those long-range missiles. The latter, that was part of a discussion between President Zelensky and President Biden, but there's no decision so far actually whether those weapons are ever going to be delivered to Ukraine. So yes, it was important for Ukrainians to hear this again in the light of the fact also that the first year anniversary is just approaching. They need to hear that the US really stands side by side with Ukraine. But then again, there's also this sense of urgency, and that time is running here and running out in the light of the fact that Russia is planning this major offensive this spring.
Yeah, Biden's words followed those of Vladimir Putin in his State of the Nation address in Moscow. How have people reacted to Putin's nuclear threats in particular?
It's not the first time that Ukrainians hear this, that basically Russia is blackmailing the rest of the world, stop supporting Ukraine, back off West, basically. Otherwise, we're just going to threaten Ukraine with the nuclear arsenal. So it's not the first time they hear it. I have to say also it's not a topic amongst people here because they really struggle just to think about how to survive here every day with the challenges that they face. I'm not just talking about the front lines, obviously, where things are much harsher even, but also here in the capital where people wake up trying to make up their minds now. Is there going to be electricity in their house? Is there going to be running water? And then again, of course, is there going to be a larger scale air offensive now ahead of the anniversary or on Friday, on February 21st? So people are nervous already. They don't really need to listen to Vladimir Putin's speech actually saying that he suspends that nuclear treaty and threatening to use a nuclear arsenal or to test a nuclear arsenal anytime soon.
And with all those politics aside, what can you tell us about the situation on the battlefield? Zelensky has been hinting at a withdrawal from Bachmut before, quote, everyone dies. What are Ukrainians being told exactly?
It's very, very difficult to establish the full picture of what is exactly actually happening in Bachmut. There's been a lot of focus on that town in the Donetsk region, which is of symbolic importance for Russians, something that they would like to present as a victory actually ahead of the anniversary, to say that there's an advancement here because there wasn't much actually during what they call already a winter offensive. But we do not know exactly what just is happening there. What we do know, however, that people are suffering in Bachmut. This was a town with 70,000 people before the war. About 5,000 civilians still remain in that heavily shelled town. And it's not just Bachmut, also the liberated city, the regional capital of Kherson region in the south, has been attacked. At least 6 people have been killed. These are civilians that were waiting at a bus station. So again, if you come back to the second question, it's not a nuclear threat that makes people nervous here, but trying to live their daily lives, go to work, waiting at the bus station and not knowing actually whether they will make it to work because of the continuous firing at towns, at villages, at this country by Russia.
DW's Fanny Fashar in Kyiv, many thanks. We're joined now by Abbas Galimov, a political analyst who used to write speeches for Russian President Vladimir Putin. He joins us from Tel Aviv, where he now lives. Mr. Galimov, welcome. Let's start at the obvious moment. Your reaction to yesterday's State of the Nation address. What do you make of Vladimir Putin's speech yesterday?
Well, the main impression is, the main result is understanding that he doesn't have plan B. Actually, it's not the first time that we have this feeling. But every time you're expecting that probably now he'll present it, probably now, because everyone in Russia, you should understand that everyone in Russia, like 100% of Russian elites and half of Russian general population, they understand that in general the situation is going in the wrong direction, that the situation is getting worse and worse. So Putin should present plan B, what he's going to change. People are looking for a change, waiting for a change. And it was a big expectation that this change will be announced, whether it be strengthening the pressure, like declaring the official war. So far, it is just a military operation, special military operation, not an all-out war. So whether declaring a big war and making total mobilization, for example, or vice versa, trying to speak more about peace and about negotiations, trying for the conflict to go down. But neither happened. He just went on pressing that everything is okay, everything is perfect, we're going in the right direction. So No plan B. This is the main conclusion.
Who, if anyone, and you've got experience in this, is writing Putin's speeches at this point? How many people actually have a say in what it is he says to the world at this point?
Well, I would say that the speechwriters team is not big, 3-4 people, no more. But, you know, you should understand that the head of the presidential administration and top managers of the administration, at least 2 or 3 of them, they're controlling the process, taking part in the process, and they're usually inviting all the deputy prime ministers and prime minister to speak about the economics. So all in all, 20 or 30 people at least.
You said in a recent interview that you could imagine a coup in Russia. Do you really see this happening? And do you see someone bold enough to try?
No, look, it's a kind of misunderstanding. I was answering the question, what would happen if Putin declares martial law and cancels the presidential elections, which are coming next year? Next March, Putin should be re-elected, and he is going to face serious problems with this unless he wins the war. Because if he doesn't win the war, if he doesn't deliver this victory, he will face serious problems. People understand that. So people started discussing, well, what would happen if he cancels the elections? And in this case, I told the chances of a military coup will increase drastically within 1 year after next March, so by March 2025, so to say. But not now. Now I'm telling vice versa. The Russian military, who theoretically can arrange this coup, the Russian special services, they are so much, you know, they are ruined, I would say, literally. Their identity is ruined. Their self-esteem is ruined by the Ukrainians, by the Ukrainian army. The defeat which Russians are suffering there, it deprives the military of their, you know, you've got to make a coup, you've got to be confident in your own strength. Right? You cannot make a coup against a dictator. It's a risky thing.
And Mr. Galimov, from what you know of Mr. Putin, from your experience with him, is he preparing for such a scenario right now, an attack on his power from within Russia? Is he ready for that?
He is always taking care of this, and that's why he mentioned the elections in his yesterday's speech. Yesterday he told elections will be in time. So he is just showing the elites who can theoretically try to depose him that, look, I'm not a dictator, I'm a popularly elected president, the nation is behind me. So he is always taking care of this.
A great time to get your insights. Vladimir Putin's former speechwriter, Abbas Galimov, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.